There's going to be days when you need help, and the families that came in that situation, they're struggling with lots of things, and I probably have a way better understanding of what I was doing now than I did then, having my own kids. Um, so that I guess that internal um, motivation, I guess, if you want to call it that, or just that understanding that this is what we do. We help other people. That's why we're here.
So when did you start your role? I thought it was August of this year, right?
It was August 19th. So as I'm looking at the calendar, it's 3 months tomorrow.
Wow.
Yeah,
How's it been the
it's
last few
been a
months?
very steep learning curve, no doubt. So yeah, I've explained it to some of the staff a few times. It's you go from an area where you feel you have some expertise. When my previous role I was in for a little over 6 years, so you're kind of the go-to person. But when you walk into a new role, it's everything. You don't know where the Post-it notes are. You don't know where the light switches are. So it really brings you to that level where you really kind of have to, walk in with a lot of humility and understand, that you gotta kind of bring yourself up to speed. I've been very fortunate in this role that I'm walking into a very like a high functioning staff group, that's really well versed in what they do. So I haven't needed to come in and change anything or to put out fires or anything like that. So it's given me the opportunity to bring myself up to speed while at the same time, business operations aren't really impacted at all.
Yeah, exactly. And I know Carol, was it Carol retired, if I'm
Yep,
not
back in
mistaken.
the springtime. Yep.
Yeah, and then Wendy moved to the county of Simcoe. So it almost felt like I've talked to a couple people as well, where it almost felt like what happened? The CDC all of a sudden changed and everything. But you're right. Like there has been a lot of people that have been with the CDC for a long time that are still very much there, right? So it's easy to kind of uh, pick the pieces or like restructure in a way that feels more a little more seamless, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's true, and we do have a quite an extensive network. The CFTC offices or the Community Futures offices across the country, quite honestly, but mostly the ones that I'm in touch with are across Ontario. They do similar things in their own communities where they are, and it's I use them as a good sounding board. Try to learn and understand different agreements and different components of what we do. So I've had just outside of our own group of 7 staff, including myself, there's hundreds across the province that I can lean on, so it's been really good that way.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, and I do wanna get back into, talking to you about that network, but first, before we get too ahead of ourselves, I'd like to bring it back and just kinda, ask you, a little bit about who you are, what your past was before coming into the CDC, because I'm sure that a lot of people don't actually, may not have met you or may not know you yet as the new, being in this new role, right?
Sure. Yeah, well, I'll go right back to the start. I started, my career in commercial banking with RBC. It's about 27 years ago now, 28 years ago now. Um, which was a great opportunity for me, and especially at the time when you're talking about kind of the mid to late 90s, that wasn't necessarily a really great employment time. So being able to be given that opportunity and brought in on that at that time was really good for me. Um, so you get to learn a lot of the different pieces of different. You start through a small business training program, and then you do a lot of SME work. You do some international work, some work with foreign exchange products. So you're kind of you're given a 3 month stint in a lot of different areas to be able to you know we tried to bring ourselves up to a like what we'd call an expert level in certain areas, because ultimately that's the advice and the pieces that you're trying to put out to the client base that we had there.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I guess I don't know too much about the banking world, but I know that there is, when you talk about commercial, it sounded like international, like a big thing, like you deal with like big,
It
uh,
it could be. It really depended. Like there was my niche or my place that I tried to get into actually was because at the time commercial banking, and this wasn't just RBC, this was across the board, was very much focused on lending. So if you were needing to borrow, $500,000, $1 million, there were people all over you. there weren't necessarily a ton of people that were going after the non-borrowers. So there were, when you mentioned international, I found a neat little role in finding Canadian subsidiaries of U.S. parent companies or European parent companies, that were selling these products that were, based in another country. But they often wouldn't or couldn't borrow in Canada because their parent company was outside.
Was another
But
country,
they
right?
still had some pretty extensive needs, and and quite honestly, from a revenue generation standpoint, which is how we were all rated, it was quite lucrative. So, I found myself the place that nobody else was looking at, and went into there. And that's sort of how I started into the not for profit world too, because again, many of the not for profits, just by their very nature, are not borrowers. But some of them had some extensive needs. Some of them had some extensive reserves with investments that we could do some things with. So that was kind of how I found my way through that first through that I guess the first half of my career.
Yeah. And then you, like I tried to look up a little bit of what you have done in the past, and you've been in charities and nonprofit. Like you've been with OSMH,
Yeah,
right? What other kind of charities have you been part of?
yeah. So it post well, the sort of as my commercial banking time ended, you know, it after almost 16 years, um, the role or the commercial banker mindset had really shifted in the industry. Where it used to be, providing good sound advice and helping businesses grow. It navigated to a really a sales environment, which was
Mm,
not where I was as an individual, and that's okay. Like I don't claim that that's a bad thing. That's what it was, and it wasn't a fit for me. But at the same time, I had been advising in the not-for-profit world for quite some time, but in the for-profit sector. So yeah, it was a reasonably easy move for me when I started getting into the OSMH Foundation and putting together some plans there. Some of their major gift programs, so dealing with high dollar donations with estates, with corporations that were looking to make investments in the local community. One that I'm really happy with, and it's come full circle in my life. Charles Bailey, who was a former CEO at TD Bank, and his father had been a family doctor in Orillia for I won't remember the number, but a lot of years. I got to say 40 years. So the name was pretty prominent, and he was kind of on the radar. The younger Charles, the CEO, was on the radar, obviously because that's someone who has a connection to Aurelia and had some fairly significant net worth, and had some great conversations with him, and eventually got to the point where we had a major investment in the hospital, and his name still appears on the one of the pediatrics. I'm going to say pediatrics outpatient ward. It's actually where my wife works right now. So every time I go visit her, I get to see that, and it's a real good sense of accomplishment. I won't be
mhm.
not going to be humble there. It feels really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And what is it about, I guess, the nonprofit that attracted you? I know you mentioned that, the banking kind of went more salesy and you were already, advising sales, for-profit businesses. But why, be a part of nonprofits in case
Yeah.
for other people as well that are interested in,
Yeah, I think that one probably goes back, 50 years now. When in growing up, I grew up in a fairly unique situation, and my father passed away when I was really young, and my mother was, she's probably the strongest person that I know still, and she's almost 90. I wouldn't want to have to fight. Uh, she was very, very much community focused, and I think that comes from both sides. That when our family went through what we went through, um, there were a lot of community members and church groups and just folks that were really able to step up and help us, because they knew we needed it, and you know the same went out from my mother's example. We were raised with that idea that, when somebody needs help, you're going to step up and you're going to go do it, whether it's an organized fundraising event or it's just because somebody needs your help today, you go do it. So that community mindset, I think, has always been there. When eventually moving away and went to McMaster University in Hamilton. um, and ended up living, just by circumstance, living right beside the Ronald McDonald House that was attached to the McMaster Hospital, which is Providence Hospital. Um, so ended up just doing some volunteer work in there, which it's really, I think it really brings everything kind of back to a very human uh, element. Everybody has those moments where they need help, and it doesn't matter your circumstance or how you got there or your net worth or anything. There's going to be days when you need help, and the families that came in that situation, they're struggling with lots of things, and I probably have a way better understanding of what I was doing now than I did then, having my own kids. Um, so that I guess that internal um, motivation, I guess, if you want to call it that, or just that understanding that this is what we do. We help other people. That's why we're here.
Yeah,
So when you relay that into the not-for-profit sector, that's generally what social services or the not-for-profit world is there for, is to be able to help others with whatever their challenge or need is right now.
absolutely. And it's something that really speaks a lot of when you talk you community, right? And I feel that. And obviously, I think if I researched correctly, the CDC, it's part of their value sets is that community centeredness. And I think it's true for a lot of nonprofits. But a lot of the people that I know around here in Orillia, they really are very much about like either shopping local, about helping people, about having that community. Like we are in a very community minded area, if you will, right? It feels very much like we're here. If somebody needs help, where people there's going to be services, there's going to be a way to find some sort of help in some way, right?
Yeah, and I think that you
And
can see that as it really has grown over the years. Like, it is a bigger city now than it was, but it's still a pretty small town. Yeah, it still has that feel of, yeah, like you walk down the street and you say good morning to people. You're not avoiding eye contact with everyone you walk by, and that feeling flows through again when there's a community event or a fundraiser or something that's going on. Like I drive by the lighthouse every day when I'm on my way to work, and that's such a tremendous example of what our community can do.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that kind of brings us back to the CDC again. So for folks that have never used the CDC before and don't know the can you actually name, because I think a lot of people, whenever I talk about the CDC, a lot of people are like, is this like the disease control? Like a lot of people get confused. Can you explain what the CDC is and kind of make actually what is the official name of it?
That is the connection. Okay, so our official name is the Orillia Area Community Development Corporation, so Orillia CDC, and Orillia area. There are proper catchment area is Orillia and the surrounding townships, so Oro-Medonte, Severn, Primera, and Rama. So we kind of take care of that specific area. We're part of a bigger network of community futures corporations, and this is one of the things that I think I would say of our network. They're not great at branding ourselves. We're all called something different in each community,
I've noticed
which doesn't really go well, right? Because in Muskoka, just north of us, they're called community futures. We're called community development. If you go down into the Niagara region, they use the words entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurship center or things like that. So we're not really well branded. But I guess I'll stick locally for now because that's what we're talking about. The Orillia Community Development Corp. The network was created back in the late '80s. So it was Brian Mulrooney's baby at the time, where he realized that there was a need to be able to provide support to small businesses because there was a gap. To be able to get businesses started, to be able to move them forward. There's a pretty good understanding, like that small business is the engine that drives all of these things. They don't always get noticed, but I think it's something like 97% of of businesses in Canada are small businesses. So that's the driver for what we do. So Mulrooney had put together this program, which ultimately started as an investment pool to be able to lend money out to small businesses, and we still do that. So there's lending that goes out. We max out at $300,000 per borrower, Now we can go above that in certain circumstances. We'll just bring in another CF office to be able to do their portion as well. So we could do 200, and Muskoka could do 200 for a deal that might be 400,000. So there are some exceptions, but generally speaking, that's the neighborhood that we live in. Um, but aside from that, we also provide coaching and guidance, certain workshops to be able to kind of raise the level, raise the skills of entrepreneurs and business owners around, uh, just to be able to help and support what they're doing. If we can move them forward a little bit, if we can create some new jobs or maintain some jobs that may otherwise be lost without those services, that's ultimately what we're there for.
And I have a question because I have been a part of some of these ecosystems. I think people call them ecosystems, but I know what's the difference between this, let's say the Orillia CDC and the Economic Development Office, because like there are other places that have that have the futures program, but that also there is an economic development office, right? That is part of the city or the whatever, that also seems to be dealing with the same thing. Like I've always kind of wondered what the difference is, or who
And
those.
and there definitely is some overlap, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. We're all kind of striving for the same result, and that's why we do tend to overlap a little bit. I think the main difference, what you'd see, is that we're very much, the CDC is very much focused on the current complement of what's here. So what is in Orillia and the surrounding areas is where our focus is. The economic development office at the city, are the ones that are going out, quite honestly, around the world, trying to drive new business into Orillia and area. Well, I guess for the city, they're driving into Orillia, but generally speaking, we all work and live in the same sort of geographic catchment area. So that's probably the biggest difference there. But having said that, yeah, we do quite a bit of work with the city staff, and they do some work with us as well. It's not surprising that you have that feeling that there's some, not duplication, but that we're in the same places sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's one of the things where it's like, okay, so who do I go to for this if I have a question about something, or like, do I go to the Economic Development Office? Do I go to, the CDC? And I know because I've worked with the Small Business Center in Orillia, in Barrie, I mean, and I've been kind of part of that ecosystem of, and that's what I like, and because they called it an ecosystem, but that everybody's very supportive and everybody helps each other. Like I usually tend to see whenever somebody puts an event, one of that ecosystem puts an event, other people from the other parts of Innisfil or Barrie or something, they show up as well to support and to kind of you know see what's going on and whatever. And I find that an incredible like system that not a lot of people actually know about. If you haven't been part of that ecosystem, if you haven't been part of that, you don't realize that there's actually a very large network out there of help that is not just in your area, but that if you don't have the resources, if you don't have the necessarily the programs, let's say, there is other programs that are maybe nearby that could benefit you or that could help you out, right? And it's something that I think usually gets, um, I guess, neglected, if you will,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
and that.
Well, I love the word ecosystem when you use that, because that's really kind of the structure of how we all work together. Um, and I got to go back a little bit to that whole idea of commercial banking going into a sales world. When you create that structure, that ecosystem, everybody's looking out for themselves. And again, as I'm not going to say it as a bad thing. That's just what it is, right? And so bringing in another partner puts you at risk, right? Because you might be losing some of that advisory services or business out the door. The ecosystem that we're in right now is very much supportive. If we elevate a business or an industry or something in the community, we don't really care who gets credit for it. It's that's the result that we're all looking for. So yeah, there are plenty of times where we're having joint meetings with the CDC staff and with city staff, or the small business center in Barrie. Yeah, it's great opportunities to be able to bring all of those, bring good minds together, and we can come up with wonderful solutions. I go back, right, I think it was 2015 was when the Blue Jays kind of had their big bump. and R.A. Dickey was pitching for the team at the time. And I remember very clearly him saying in an interview, like a post-game interview, he said, "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets credit for it."
Mm,
And
amazing. Yeah.
that really stuck to me.
Yeah. Totally. Like that's very powerful and it's true. And I think a lot of people coming in and talking a little bit when it comes from the perspective of a small business owner, right? A lot of people that are starting a new business or that, even just even started a business a few years ago, it feels, and I've heard of it because I'm as a marketing consultant, I've heard a lot of people talk about how it's lonely. Like, it feels like I'm doing everything myself. I'm wearing all hats, not just a few. I'm wearing all of them, and I don't know where to go, and I don't know how to manage, how to deal, how to do all this kind of stuff, but are unaware of the fact that, yeah, there are people that want to support you, that want to help you out, that don't want the credit. They want you to succeed, right? Genuinely want you to succeed. And that's what the CDC and that's what, all these, this ecosystem
Yeah,
is.
that's what our mandate is.
Yeah.
You're mandated to be able to elevate you and your business and whomever else. Yeah. So that idea of, yeah, you have to do everything by yourself, there's some truth to that. As an entrepreneur, you're the one and only, but there are definitely supports there. Example that we had fairly recently, we had a group of people that were trying to navigate a business from a sole proprietorship into a partnership, actually, was multiple partners, and it was reasonably complex. And I guess when you stop and step back and think about that, that's the only time that these people will ever go through this process in their life.
Mhm.
This is a one-time thing. If you go lean on supports like the CDC or some of the other folks, we either have seen this before or we know somebody else who has gone through it. So we can bring in those pieces so that you're not having to navigate this all by yourself and try to figure it all out. Because if you do that, you don't know actually what to do until the process is done. And that's when you have that moment of like, oh, if I knew that now, I would go back and I would do it just a little bit differently, or it would take half the time, or some of the cost would be for aid. It's like there would be something that you would learn from that. So take the advice of the folks who have already learned it, and get that advice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So with that, can you tell people a little bit more about what is it that the CDC does in terms of programming or in terms of like what are the services that you guys actually provide?
Mhm. So I'm gonna say there's three main ones that we get involved in. Number one is our lending portfolio. So if there's a business that's looking to, buy a new piece of machinery, or if there's a certain challenge that you have that needs, an element of capital injection, come and talk to the CDC. Um, every situation is going to be very different, so I can't necessarily generalize how and what we lend to, other than to say that we do. So come have those discussions. We're not again, relaying to a sort of a traditional lending environment where you're looking at a return on investment calculation. That's not where we live. We live in the arena where we can look at a loan application and say, is this going to be creating a couple of jobs in our community? Is this going to be, allowing a business to continue where it otherwise might not? Is there some sort of elevation in the business community that's helping us? We do have to evaluate, is the loan going to be repaid? Like that's got to be part of the calculation, but that's not the only part, right? That's not our initial look at something. So our loan portfolio is one thing that we um, that's one of our sort of central pillars. Um, we have a sort of a coaching and guidance and advice component as well. So that's where, I mentioned with the sole prop going to a partnership structure, that just to be able to sit down and walk through those sorts of things, look for the resources that are there, bring in other peers or other folks that have been through these processes before to be able to help you and guide you in that process. Um, then we have some external or group workshops and pieces that we put together. Currently looking at one that's going to be going on just in a couple of weeks around Canva. So it's
Right. Yeah.
a graphic design tool for small business. So to be able to put that on, bring some folks together that can sit and listen to an expert and actually walk you through hands-on. We actually ask everyone to bring your laptop with you because we're going to be doing this together. This isn't just a lecture series. We're going to walk you through some of those sorts of things. So folks that are needing to do that for their own marketing purposes. That's what that's there for. So those are sort of the three main areas, I guess, that we deal in.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So from a loan perspective, and I'd like your take on it. Like, you kind of mentioned that you're not in the business of profiting off of the loan or anything, right? But for people that would want more clarification, what would be the difference between coming to the CDC for a loan and or going to the bank? Like, why would I go to the CDC? I guess for a loan.
So I guess we'll talk ecosystem and structure again because we already read there. Um, if you're going to a traditional lender, which I guess bank is the obvious comparison, you're going to have someone who's going to be taking your information, but on often the decision making on either granting a loan or not is made centrally. So there will be a risk management department, often in Toronto or wherever head office is located, that's adjudicating these loans, and then the local person is charged with delivering the message, yay or nay, to the client here. All of our decisions are crafted and completed here in Orillia. So we have our own staffs that do the adjudication of loans. We have an investment committee that also reviews them, or a board of directors, depending on the situation. And those are all people that live and work in our area, people that know the challenges of Orillia and area, people that know who does business with who, and they understand the ecosystem that we live in here. We're not some offsite organization that's having to kind of relay a very square peg round hole idea,
Right.
from a long ways away.
Hmm. But you guys utilize, I guess, just for clarity, because I'm not even sure as well. But you guys use the same interest rate as banks, right?
Not exactly. And it will depend on the situation. But let's say we're competitive. We're in that same environment. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And for the advice portion, you mentioned that there's like a coaching advice scenario. What kind of advice? Because we talk about the solopreneurs trying to get, or sole proprietorship trying to get into a partnership. But what kind of advice can I go for to get help with? Like, there's a lot of different things that I don't know. I feel like a lot of business owners just aren't sure whether they can actually go for something, because it may feel like it's not enough. Like, oh, I don't know how to, I've had this business for a few years now. I don't know how to grow it anymore, right? Like, I don't know if that's something that I can come to the CDC for, or should I just figure it out myself? Or, if I have a question about marketing, or is this only like big things? Like, if you're going from a sole proprietorship to a corporation, are you going to get a loan? Or like, what kind of advice can you provide?
Mhm. Yeah, and that's so the general an- excuse me, the general answer that I'm going to give you there is yes, come in for all of those things. Uh, and with the caveat that we may not had necessarily have the expertise in house to deal with the specific challenge of what you have, but that's where we kind of rely on that broader network. Whether that's network of other business owners in the community, that we know someone who has gone through a similar process, so we can kind of try to match up and do some peer-to-peer work. Whether that is, someone that I spoke to in Belleville, at a conference that we were at with the other CF networks. Let me give them a call and see how they work through with that. And, we have Zoom technology, or whatever platform you use, we can link you up with someone who's not in our area. Again, because we're not competitive with each other. We're trying to elevate everyone. So the resources and the advice that is available is pretty broad. So in answer to the question, what questions can you come in with? All of them. Come in with all of them, and we're quite happy to either give you the answer or to direct you, into the right place.
Okay. Yeah, cool. And I know that you guys have consultants, for I know because I have received like a document to create a business plan. So I know that you kind of help kind of curate that. I know Dan, right? He's used to be a marketer, so he can help you with questions for marketing and stuff like that. So it's a very wide range that I know the CDC to be, right? But it's important for people to kind of, I think people get stuck in that, oh, I think my question is not good enough, or, I have that self-consciousness that I don't want people to judge me. I don't want people, how do I use my website properly? Some people don't even are afraid to figure even that out, right?
Mhm.
And it's such a common occurrence, right? But to be able to have the ability to just go to someone, have that space where
Yeah.
people do it, I think that's
And I'll put one word into this conversation that I don't think we've used yet, and it's free. The coaching, the guidance, the advice pieces are all free. So please, they if that's the barrier that, and admittedly, some people don't go searching out those sorts of things because it's going to take, it's going to come at a cost. And so
Mm.
if that's the barrier, don't worry. You can walk in the door and come make an appointment or call us on the phone. OriliaCDC.com is our website. All of the resources are there, all of our contact information, and anybody can come in the door.
Amazing. Cool. And what is it, I guess, what kind of businesses do you serve? Is it just anyone as well? Like, and if I'm a startup or I don't have a business, can I come in and talk to the CDC, or do I need to have a business already?
Our minds are working really well together because I was actually considering that last question. I wanted to keep going into that because we do see quite a number of folks that are not entrepreneurs or not business owners right now, but are wanting to get into that world. So absolutely, we bring those folks in. Um, we're currently working on developing some programming. There's quite a number of newcomers to Canada in the Simcoe County area. And many of them are looking for business opportunities. So we're trying to find certain programming, certain pieces that we can put together, working with Georgian College and working with others around in the community and the county as well, to be able to kind of put the resources together to be able to take care of that piece, because we notice the trends that are going on in our area.
Yeah, absolutely. And more people want to figure out if they can have their own business, right? I think it goes back to that concept that I was talking about, where that self consciousness feeling is like, am I good enough? Like, can I actually do this? Can I move ahead? Can I, ask that question, right? I think uh, entrepreneurship, a lot of it has to do with that mentality of, even if you're afraid, you have to still go through it, right?
Mhm.
There's a certain level of uncomfortable that you have to be okay with. But overcoming that, right, is an essential piece, I think, that having the right education, or having the right the person to ask something out of, right,
And
could really.
I'm sure if you go and talk to the most successful business owners, either locally or internationally, they'll all say the same thing. They all questioned it. They all weren't certain. They all had doubts. They all had days when they wondered if we should just pack it up and, go get a job. Like, so, I think that natural, that human piece is there. Our brains are wired for that. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so that's
absolutely.
definitely there.
Yeah. So I have an interesting I was thinking about this, and I don't know if we want to get into it, but I was thinking about, if I were just someone in the community, right, that wanted to start a new business, right? What kind of advice would you give me, just, even if it's just generalized, just for me to kind of start sinking my teeth into it? What kind of advice would you give me? I want to start a business. What can I do? What should I do? Where should I start? Just for people that are interested.
Oftentimes those questions come down to the market that you're in. So if we're just talking about sort of Orillia and the surrounding areas, take a look at take a look at what problem is not being solved right now. What is it that is someone's issue, that if there were a product, if there were a service, if there were something there, that you would solve a problem for a big group of people. Because that's ultimately how business is formed, right? There wasn't I'm struggling to think of a really good example right now, but just look around the room, and you'll probably find something that that didn't exist before until somebody created that product, and then everybody went, "Oh, we all needed that."
We all need that, yeah.
Yeah, and that was there. So that's ultimately where it comes from, is that people buy things because they have a need, they have a problem that or something that they need solved, and you just need to develop a widget or a service or whatever it is that's going to help them through that. And on top of that too, we're very well aware in our industry that there are a lot of current existing businesses that are actually in the process or will be in the process of transitioning. it sort of overlays on the baby boomer demographic
Mm.
and I don't remember what the statistics are, but there's a significant number of businesses that are considering or will be retiring or transitioning in the next 10 years. So there may be an existing business in our area that would be a great fit for you. And if you talk to the person who currently owns it, they might be you might be a great the fit for them as well, right? Because you have the same or similar skill set that you can take on and will allow them to transition or retire out of their business, and the business maintains, what it does and continues to thrive here. So we're putting some programming together around that because we definitely see that a need for that within our
Well,
community.
actually, now that you reminded me, there used to be, I don't know if there still is, but there used to be a program called BizLink that the CDC was handling. So that is for people, and I guess it's better if you explain it because I'm doing it from an outside perspective. But from my perspective, it was that. It was a place for entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs that wanted to start something, to find businesses that are looking to sell or looking to retire in this area in particular.
Yeah, it is still available. So that is something that's, and again, if you go to OrilliaCDC.com, there will be a link to that, to the BizLink program. Essentially, it is still in development somewhat. So it's being tinkered with and being more formalized and trying to broaden it out outside of just our specific area. We're trying to actually build it out, perhaps even across the province. Um,
Mm.
and what it is, the quickest way I can explain it, it's a dating app for business owners and buyers and sellers, right? Trying to find those links, find those connections. You have those discussions and decide whether you want to go on a second date or a third date. To be able to match people up that fit within that. I will say I was either fortunate enough or just I'm old enough that I actually didn't go through the dating app world. I was married just as it was coming into fashion, so I don't really know the dating app world. I'm sort of taking this for what it is. Maybe it has bigger challenges that I'm aware of, but I'm happy to not have to do that. Um, but that's ultimately what it is, right? Trying to match up those and the idea or the concept of it, going out a little bit broader, will be that there's going to be a larger database of companies, that it might not necessarily be something locally here, um, that 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 would pique your interest as a buyer. There might be something in Ingersoll, but you could navigate that into Orillia or the area here. Um, but the product or the service that's provided, you may be able to bring that in house here.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think from my own personal perspective, I'll talk about BizLink because my wife and I, we both were able to acquire the Villager magazine basically through the BizLink program. So what we did is actually we didn't start through BizLink. We knew each other already. So from an outside perspective, when we were trying to figure out, okay, I think I want to go ahead with the purchase, or I want to, I want to figure out how to take over the magazine in some way, but we had no idea how to do it because we had never, done a formal agreement or done anything like that before. So we actually went to Carol at the time and asked her, and she sat us down and we kind of asked her questions, and she gave us that advice and that guidance. So it is possible for you to go through even just that program or just go to the CDC for questions, even if you are not um, you found the business that you want to be buying or purchasing, not necessarily through those networks. Uh, regardless, you can go and ask them questions, and they'll help you out because that was hugely helpful to just kind of relieve our tensions. We had no idea what we needed to put in that agreement, right? So just being able to ask that question and kind of go through that and like, do we need a lawyer? Do we not need a lawyer? Do we need like, whatever? Like, what are these things? How does this usually happen, right? And have that was really really helpful.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm thinking too that, like, because we're not in the business of selling a product, it really gives us an opportunity to vet someone as an individual too. Because there will be some folks, and I will even say this of myself at an earlier point of my life, thinking of being an entrepreneur, that I wasn't ready for it. And I think if I had that interview with Carol, with Dan, with whomever, that they would have been able to bring that out of me to understand that, like, no, this isn't right for you. And that's okay because not everybody is. Not everybody's cut out for that. It was an old saying that somebody gave me a long time ago, which is, owning your own business gives you the freedom to work any 18 hours a day you choose.
Yeah.
And when you start to really dig into that, that might not be for you or for me, or it might not be for me right now, but I can build my way towards that. So yeah, it's just great that we're not, we're not pigeonholed into forcing you into a business, right? We're there to kind of elevate you and give you the right advice.
Absolutely. And that reminded me as well. There's a saying that I've heard a couple times talking about how you would be trading a 9 to 5 to our 24/7, right?
Yeah.
But but the 24/7 is for something that you actually love, or something that you have a passion for, something that you really enjoy. So you're thinking about it from that perspective. And I've always thought business as an incorporation of to my life, instead of it being, my life being run by my business, right? Whenever I have spare time, I will go shopping, or I will do whatever. I've always thought that business should be an incorporation of my personal life, and my business should be attached to that, right? Like, I want to live a certain way, and this business, this, whatever, it's about making it fit into the life that I want to live, right? And I think a lot of people get the opposite way of, now that I run a business, or I own a business, or I bought something, I need to go at the same pace or the same style, or do the same things that used to be before, for the sake of, um, because that is what's working, right? But that's not necessarily what's going to be the best, for you and for your life, specifically, right?
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, amazing. So, is there anything else that we, maybe should speak to, that maybe we forgot to speak about, or any questions that we might have missed?
Yeah, well, the one part that I'll relay back to what we chatted about earlier was just that hurdle or that barrier or that question about whether you should come in the door. And by in the door, I also mean, email, telephone, whatever it is, contacting the CDC. And I would say that that's part of the human condition, is that we're wired for negativity somewhat. So there is that barrier of saying, like, oh well, no, they don't want to talk to me, or that my question isn't good enough. I would just encourage everyone to make that call anyway. um, and it might very well turn out that it's not the right place for you, or that it's not the right question, or they will direct you in another area, and that's fine. The important part is that you take the step, right? You do the thing.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, that's great. Absolutely. And I know this episode will most likely be released close to the new year. So, do you have any advice for people that are looking to, because as you know, in the new year, everybody seems to have this renewed sense of confidence. I'm going to plan things out. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to go ahead. Do you have any some sort of advice, or any tips that you may want to tell people that are looking to, I guess, start planning, what is it that I'm going to be doing next year? What is it that I want to?
The one piece that we do find pretty regularly, and this is regardless of whether this is a new business, a change in business, a shift in anything, is the time component. Give yourself lots of time. If you think something's going to take 3 weeks, probably triple that. Because there are always hurdles or other items that you really haven't thought of, or any. I'm not going to bash the CRA, I promise. But if you need to make changes at the CRA, it's not as simple as you send the form in and they just change it, right? That could be a 6 to 8 week process.
It
So,
is, yeah, it's
you
a
know, so
process.
so just build those windows in. It's going to take a lot longer than you would initially think, regardless of what your question or your thought is. Give yourself the time to do it.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Like, it's a very common thing. We live in a very busy world. Like, there's always things happening, there's always opportunities coming in, but there's always things that are, like, holding us back, right? I get sick one week. I get the flu. There's a lot of people I know right now that are getting the flu. Like, that's going to stop you
Mhm.
and put you out of commission for at least a couple weeks. So you got to give yourself that time. Absolutely. You're 100% right. That's amazing. Well, thank you very much, Jim. I think we have gone through everything that we needed to go through for this conversation. So I thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much. This is a great opportunity for me too. I think I mentioned, or I don't know if we mentioned, but like this is the first podcast I've ever done. So, to be able to put, I put myself out there and I did that. So everybody else that's listening to this, you do the same. Walk in the CDC's door and ask the question that you need to ask that you might have been a little bit fearful about asking.
Exactly. Now you know how to be on a podcast. You can tell other people how to be one. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks, too.